presenting on jazz and disability and talking about some representation in the field. Cool. Why this topic, you ask? Why? Well, here's 4 great reasons why. One, it's thinking of it analytically, right? We want to learn a bit more about these musicians' musical voices. We're going to be focusing on 3 pianists specifically, and we're going to learn how their disabilities / disadvantages shape their sounds and their music. To gain perspective, right? We want to shed more light on a rather unexplored subject, raise a bit more awareness towards this, introduce new ideas / music to a larger audience, gain more of an appreciation for the hardships and adaptations that these musicians had to overcome and use in their music, and then just help inform more people about these musicians and this community in and of itself. Third reason, to explore. It gave me a bit more background into the community that I belong to, comparing my life to theirs and seeing how I can and have adjusted my playing for my art, my music, compositionally, all that good stuff. Then lastly, to inspire. I'm hoping that hearing these musician stories with all y'all inspires you to go check them out, do more research into maybe underrepresented groups as a whole in jazz, just as much as they have inspired me. Cool. So this is kind of like an ethnomusicology thing rather than just going over compositional devices or transcription study. So I had to use a lot of different research methods, right? So I used some scholarly articles, looked at some medical journals, reviews, news articles, etc. Used some media, video listening, podcasts, right? I did some personal transcription on to see possibly how their physical abilities on the piano shape their playing with some phrasings, etc. Their literal sound at the piano, like how they sound versus that type of thing. Use some online resources as well, blog posts, message boards, Discogs, which is a really great resource to finding any info about any record. And then, lastly, for my last subject, I learned about him maybe 3 weeks before my proposal, all from Roger Woods, and he made me do this huge deep dive into it. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, cool guy to check out in Eugene. Okay, before we begin, it is important to note, today we're only going to be covering 3 pianists with physical disabilities, rather than a lot of cases people know pianists with blindness or maybe some mental challenges or mental disabilities that they could have. But we're just going to be focusing on physical disabilities. That being said, there are many different examples of jazz musicians with a wide spectrum of disabilities and disadvantages. It's important to note that. And they all deserve to be studied and heard. I have compiled a list for you all to check out at the end. There's going to be a QR code. Go ahead and scan it. It's a short list because there are a lot of people out there that is assumed they have those rather than physically proven or in writing or something. So I didn't want to include people like Thelonious Monk or Phineas Newborn. But there are plenty of other examples on there. Also, yes, these musicians are disabled, but it is really important to note them as artists first, right? Their inherited disadvantages shaped them as people and musicians, but it did not define them in the art, right? Cool. Are you ready?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, let's go. First off, we're going to look at Michel Petrucciani, a French pianist born in 1962, and here is a short clip of him playing his tune, Colors. bio on Michel. Born in Orange, France, he's part of a musical family, the Petrucciani musical family. His brother Luis played bass, and his father and younger brother were both guitarists. Started playing gigs when he was a child at 12 years old with his family, and he just was discovered by Clark Terry in 1978 at 16 years old. Unfortunately though, because of his disease, his father was like really protective of him and kind of forced him to live in isolation unless they were traveling together as a family, gigging, etc. And that was that way until the age of 18. Once he turned 18, he moved to the US to escape his family, just be a bit more free, and wanted to play jazz full time. So he moved to New York City. From there, he had a great career, and he traveled around the US, with one of his first big gigs being the touring pianist with saxophonist Charles Wood. And he passed away at the height of his career at 36 years old from pulmonary embolism. So, let's dive into his disability a little bit first. He had osteogenesis. Can you tell us what? We'll have questions at the end. He had osteogenesis imperfecta, type 7, brittle bone disease, causes abnormally short height and deformation of vital bones, such as tibia, forearm, etc. It affects the person's bone structure as well, making breaks, sprains, anything to do with, attack on, that sounds weird, attack on like bones and stuff like that hurt. So breaking, dislocations in fingers, etc. Cool. So this is also linked to pulmonary ailments, and for him, his pulmonary embolism that he died from, so basically that is blood clots in your lungs, and because his bone structure was messed up, on a regular bone structure, the veins have easier travel access and stuff like that. Because his was messed up, they're all twisted, and that causes clots to happen way easier. So that happened in his lungs. That's what he died from. And it also causes chronic pain. This affected his ability to walk, sit for long periods, and his technique at the piano. Okay, let's dive into his sound at the piano. So for Michel, we're going to talk about mostly his literal technique at the keyboard. We'll dive a little bit into his harmonic language, some of his compositional tendencies, and stuff like that. But mainly we're going to talk about his sound at the piano. Okay, some noticeable characteristics. His really heavy attack, what I call like a really woody tone. It sounds like you're clanking a piece of wood together. Like that, rather than just like a nice soft mellow tone. His hands were actually of larger size. He could reach a whole tenth with his hands, allowing him to bear more forward weight and momentum with just his hands. Usually you want to, when playing piano and get a good sound, you want to use your whole weight and gravity to do the trick, but this might look funny. But Michel, because he was a person of smaller stature, he played like this, so all of his hands had to do the work. He had to use hand strength rather than arm movement. And the fact he could hit that large sound with just his hands is a feat in and of itself. He was also able to pedal in a certain way. He had like, I'll show you in the next slide, a contraption that had the pedals lifted up. And one reason why he sounded almost exactly the same from 1988 to the end of his career is he actually had Steinway make a custom piano for him that he would have at every gig and recording session with said pedaling system until the end of his death. So that's one reason why he has such a consistent tone throughout his whole career. Cool, moving on. Yes. Here is said piano with the pedaling system. And you can see that he's almost basically shoulder height at the keys, so he doesn't really have a lot of room to do this to come down, so it's all this happening. Cool, so we're going to look at this transcription. This is not really seen very well, but at the end of the presentation, all these transcriptions are in the QR code. Just pay attention to line direction, really, because I just want you to hear his tone and articulations that he gets out of these lines. This is a lot of just classic bebop language in this tune. He wrote Little Piece in C for You. It's off an album called Flamingo, where he actually has Stefan Grappelli, who is like a violinist from the late 20s, early 30s that played with Django Reinhardt, and this was actually made in 1996. So his career also spans a wide range. But yeah, let's check this out real quick. So if you just notice a couple things before we move on, no loss in like virtuosity in this, right? With just hand movement, he's able to really get that really hard woody tone out of the piano. No loss of movement with his right hand at all. Specifically looking at the triplet line, some really cool stuff. Check it out. Okay, some of his influences, we're going to move away from the keyboard now. Just talk a little bit about some of his harmonic choices and everything like that. Melodically, he is really inspired by Bill Evans, and there's a transcription in the QR code that has a comparison between his playing on Night and Day for, I can't remember the Bill Evans album, but Night and Day with Pianism on Michel Petrucciani's album is like one and the same. And then also on his album Looking Up, melodically it's kind of like Keith Jarrett on his 1989 album Music, or excuse me, Looking Up. Harmonically, he takes a lot from McCoy and Herbie with a lot of the modal, chordal voicings that we've got going on. That was seen in the previous clip, Colors, at the beginning of the Michel Petrucciani section. And then technique-wise, all day, right here, Bud Powell lines, we have Oscar Peterson going on, Art Tatum, he's heavily inspired by Art Tatum, and just a lot of that classic virtuosic piano playing we hear. Okay, lastly with him, he was a bit of a character, kind of a party animal. He referred to himself as the friendly elf. It's kind of funny, but also kind of weird. He was also heavily into drugs and loved to party, so it kind of influenced his music. He loved writing things with weird forms. He himself called a lot of his tunes impish and witty. But that just personality stuff led directly into his musical voice. And in Tail, that plays into his disability because he never let that stand in his way. He always pushed through that, never was a block, you know, he always played through it. Funny quote from him about this is, "My philosophy is have a really good time, never let anything stop me from doing what I want to do." It's like driving a car, waiting for an accident. There's no way to drive a car. If you have an accident, you have an accident. C'est la vie, right? So we took that with all of life and music making. Cool. Cool. Moving on, we're going to talk about my personal favorite, Horace Parlan. Here's a clip of him playing Monk's Mood. Pennsylvania. To deal with depression when he was a kid, his parents enrolled him into piano lessons. He was depressed because he had polio. He contracted polio when he was a young man. He had a very long career as both a band leader and a sideman, with 33 albums as lead/co-lead and over 40 albums as a sideman. Most popularly, he joined Mingus's, shouldn't say big band, joined Mingus's band in 1957, which then was his shoot into having a longer, successful career. He's also what I'm calling part of the Danish migration. I coined that term myself. It's about a bunch of jazz musicians who moved to Denmark in the 70s and 80s, like Thad Jones, Ben Webster, Ed Thigpen, Dexter Gordon, etc. It's where he lived for the rest of his life. So, Horace's disability. At the age of 5, he got sick with polio. Polio is an infectious disease, often transmitted through contaminated food or water that can attack the nervous system and cause total paralysis. So for him, it caused total paralysis of his hand. When everything else came back, his 2 fingers, his ring finger and his middle finger, were frozen due to muscle atrophy. So he didn't have use, and his hands would look like this. So when he would play, if anyone can see this, he just wouldn't have use of these 2 hands, these 2 fingers. And then towards the end of his life, he did also develop blindness. So let's talk about his sound at the piano. In one word, adaptation. Horace Parlan is one of the, in my opinion, one of the greatest compers, great feel and soloing, all through adaptation of his disability. Some noticeable characteristics we're going to take a look at. His technique, left hand was always the most dominant hand while playing. Horace's right hand would often play like tops of lines and chords, while the left hand would be, the whole shape of a chord, classic thing going on, except we'd maybe just be one note up here and the whole shape down here, or with just his thumb as well. He's great at what I'm calling stride-esque, right? Due to his disability, he couldn't be fully like Art Tatum or Oscar Peterson level of stride, but he made it work with simpler voicings and less travel. He's really known for his excellent time and his laid-back eighth note feel, which we'll hear in a bit. Parlan was on the cusp of the post-bop era, and later in life, he had a really heavy soul jazz feel like Shirley Scott, Late Cannonball, Stanley Turrentine type stuff. He was heavily influenced by Ahmad Jamal and Bud Powell. I was listening to this interview that he had, I think 2 years before he died, and all he was talking about for like 20 minutes was how he only listened to Ahmad Jamal for like 10 years, just would try to copy exactly what he's playing. And this is really evident on Summertime, Heading South, and Dexy on his record, Happy Frame of Mind. Again, those are included in the article. Okay, so we're going to watch a video really quick. We're going to check out how Parlan plays firm roots. A couple things to look out for here. Look at how integral the left hand is to the melody. Just watch his playing, and look how the right hand and the left hand navigate the actual melody together. And then look at his use of single notes instead of octaves. The head of firm roots is on piano usually it's used in octaves. Well, he uses single note here through right hand and left hand division. Solo, all left hand stuff basically. It's really, really cool. And then check out some of his comping, but it's so excellent that we will get to that into another slide. Here we go. like some of his soloing, a lot of lines would be ended with like thumb stuff, like that, or we'd see where he'd be using his thumbs as like start or end line. And then with the head, you can see the relationship. Some really cool stuff going on. Okay, it's comping time, baby. Let's get a round of applause for some comping. Okay, to me, Horace Parlan is a master comper. It's always the perfect balance, full yet light, percussive yet smooth, felt rather than heard, right? Yeah, perfectly balanced, as all things should be. Right, Robert? You get it? Okay, cool. Good. Okay, check this out. Again, sorry, you can't really see this very well, but this is in the QR code. This is Horace Parlan and Archie Shepp duo record. Oh, I love this album. Basically play it every time I get the chance to. This is a ballad called Going Down Slow, and it really showcases his stride-esque playing, right? It's not a fast tune, but he's really able to outline the harmony with just simple techniques and concepts. Root and critical tone in the left hand, one-line melodic stuff going on. Fourths or thirds in the right hand because these two fingers were not able to do stuff, so like that. And then these would be separated like this, so sometimes he could do a third, but it'd be up in like the black keys of the shape, right? Like that. Yeah, so let's just check that out really quick. Cool. So I think this is just. I think this is really great at showcasing how little you need to really hold down the harmony in a duo context. Nothing incredibly fancy here going on. It's root, critical tones with some 5/9 playing voicings. And in the left hand, it's root and 7 a lot of the time. So this is a really good example of that. And there's just enough rhythmic energy. The harmony's being held down the whole time. And he would always use the right hand to either like have the top of the chord or some accentuated melody, right? And it's nothing, it's not octaves or anything, it's just single line stuff. Cool. Find this in the transcription later. Okay, a couple of my favorite recordings of Horace Parlan that I think you should check out. Speaking My Piece, off Blue Note, 1960, with this quintet, the Turrentine Brothers, George Tucker and Al Harewood. My favorite tune off that is Rostas, playing it on my recital. Moving and Grooving, another Blue Note record, trio. He plays all the melody, comping, it's really good stuff. Going Home and Trouble in Mind, two duo records he made with Archie Shepp on the Steeplechase label. And this was really cool. There's a link to this in the QR code. The Librarian, which is a Luis Petrucciani record, which is Michel Petrucciani's brother. And it actually has both Horace and Michel on the same track. One's comping, one's soloing, vice versa. It's really cool to see the two sounds kind of coagulate together in the band and how they work together. That tune is Little Esther on that track, on that album. Okay, finally, to me, Parlin represents what jazz is all about. Perseverance, innovation, expression, and the need to be in the moment, all in favor of just one thing, to play this music. I think something I hope we all can relate to really well. In a 2015 interview with journalist Riki, I don't know, they're Danish, Parlin said this about his love of music. I wasn't going to let the will of my parents, society, my body, or nobody bend my will to play this music. Something I really heavily relate to, so I really appreciate that. Okay, next, Carl Perkins. No, Joe, not the 50s rockabilly guitarist. Nice try, not this guy. Not this guy. Okay. Just not this guy, just want to double check. Okay. Okay, real short bio about Carl Perkins. He was born in Indianapolis, Indiana. He was in the Army for a little bit. There's not much written about his life because he lived a short period, but his first band that he was in was the Curtis Kuntz Group. He was with Harold Land, Jack Sheldon, and Frank Butler. After that, he moved to LA. 1953, his career began to kind of take off a little bit. And he was the original pianist in the Max Roach Clifford Brown group. The tune Gherkin for Perkin on the classic record Study in Brown, where you have Sandu and stuff like that, is actually written for him. He was not the pianist on that album, though. He actually wrote the tune Groove Yard as well, and it's most popularly on Montgomery Brothers' self-titled album, 1961. He was only a sideman on 12 records in his short life, and only released one under his own name. Again, not much was written about him. He died very young, at the age of 29, at a heroin overdose, and he started his career later in life as well. Okay, so, kind of on the opposite spectrum of Horace Parlin. Carl Perkins also had polio, except instead of affecting his right hand and fingers, it affected his whole left arm. So he'd have to play the piano with his left hand perfectly parallel the whole time. This gained him the nickname of the Crab. Oftentimes, because of this, he'd be able to ghost note or hit roots and stuff like that with his elbow. You can actually hear it a little bit, I'm convinced of, in the recording I'll be showing you here in a second. So, Perkins at the piano. Some notable characteristics. His technique, his left hand was almost exclusively critical tone, two-note voicings, small triads, closed block, seconds, single note, that type of thing. Just couldn't feasibly play bigger chords with his left hand. His right hand would often use upper structures to fill out those voicings, and for soloing, he'd always be able to navigate most of the keyboard, but I'm assuming, based off pictures and recordings, because from what I've heard, he really never plays down here ever, solo-wise. It's very difficult for him to, switch and play down low. Style, hard bop, baby. It's really cool. Would often ditch comping altogether, and he would use responses instead of comping chords a lot of the time. And he would just have the bass hold down the melody in quartet sections, or in quartet settings. His time feel, he was really known for having a super relaxed time feel, reminiscent of Bud Powell and Hampton Hawes to me. Leroy Vinegar was a bassist he played with, and he said that Carl was his favorite pianist to work with, just strictly on his time feel. Okay, but check this out. Right? Let me hear a laugh. Let me hear a laugh, please. Thank you. Let's listen to his comping a little bit. A lot of this is all critical tones. His time feel, super laid back. His sound at the piano, very percussive. If you listen really closely in this clip, I'll try and point it out, but I'm pretty convinced I'm hearing some elbow comping as well. introducing Carl Perkins. It's his one album as a leader. It's trio. It's 1956 Dutone Records. Have violin, Will Swing, with Stuff Smith as the leader. He's comping on this is like almost all call and response type stuff. Stuff Smith is also really cool. Check him out a bit more. Leroy Walks, that bassist I was telling you about. He's a pianist on that, 1958. And this record that actually, I think it was Mike that showed me, looking back. My freshman year, he showed me this Dexter Gordon album, Hot and Cool. Dexter Blows Hot and Cool. And I've always loved the piano playing on it and didn't know until like this last year that Carl Perkins was the pianist. So, some really cool stuff on that too. All right, it's me time, baby. It's all about me now. Delos Erickson, that's me. 1999 to, we'll see what happens. Short bio, right? I like jazz. Cool? Oh. Wait. And everyone says, oh. Did not get as many laughs as I thought. That's cool. Here, Robert. Okay, so a little bit about me. The disability that I have is osteochondroma. It's an overgrowth of cartilage and bone that grows near growth plates. So this affects my whole body, but more specifically for playing, my wrists and hands. My left wrist has nerve damage, and my right wrist is deformed right at the growth plate, right? You can see that. So a lot of times I have to play because of this. My elbow's bent out. I can't straighten them out and play unless my wrist is curved, or if I have to come forward, my elbows have to be bent out, which is contrary to most piano technique. Some of my side effects may include nerve damage, tendonitis, finger dislocation, a lot of the times on my ring finger. Lots of scars, which means I'm cooler than you, right? Cool. I guess not. So what this means in general is that still I'm very privileged in comparison to these musicians and nowhere near as disadvantaged as they are or were. But I must be constantly listening to my body and adjusting my technique as needed. So this was kind of the whole thing was cool, but this was the more personally cool part for me. This year, I really got to explore my sound at the piano and how I can develop a bigger sound. A lot of the times I feel like I still do to this day and I'm working on it, but have a smaller sound because I can't articulate as much. It's harder for me to do that. But I really feel like this year it's been going much better. I have a much fuller sound, widely to like adapting to my technique on a daily, knowing what I have to change, really listening to my body. For me, I'm hugely influenced by Bill Evans, Monk. Boris Parlin is really one of my favorites. Brad Mehldau, George Duke, and he's sadly not here today, Keith Brown. So, finally, for all this, my biggest takeaway from all this research would be that regardless of what I have been given, or what really anyone has been given, I/you/we are all lucky to play this music, and I can learn from people in a community that really inspires me. Every human has a voice here, every musician is welcome and has a place in this world. But having jazz as that tool to spread that message is just as sweet, regardless of the means of how you do that. So, having to listen to their music, gain a bit more sense of self, is one of the more rewarding things to come to me out of this project. And hoping that y'all can do some more research in and of yourselves of who inspires you to gain more of a sense of self with y'all's playing. So, after taking a look into the lives, musicianship, and stories of these underdogs in the jazz world, and how they propelled this music into new lands, there's one thing that I certainly know that I have to do. No matter the cost, time, or effort, I'll always have to strive to have my voice heard in this music and push to be the best artist I can be, all through the inspiration of others. Now get back to the shed, soldier. QR code, baby. I'll take questions. I feel like that was pretty fast. All right.
I was curious for that first guy you're talking about. I think you said pulmonary. I'm
Yeah.
not sure what that meant.
So I think I explained it a little bit afterwards, but it has to do with blood clots, and because his bone structure was different than most people, the veins and arteries, like on, I'll say, a regular bone structure, have easier travel lanes, right? They can go, they're straighter, whatever. Because of his short stature and deformed growth, important bones like the forearm and stuff like that, they would like wrap, so there's more ways for the arteries to get tangled. It's harder for blood to pass through. So because of those blood clots that happened in his lungs, because of his chest plate's all deformed, and that's what like eventually killed him. Yeah, kind of down, but whatever. Any other questions? Mr. Scanlon.
Oh, please, Mr. King.
Oh my gosh.
No,
Okay.
you.
I never really noticed like anything that seemed like that you couldn't do at the piano. So like, are there any like techniques or voicings that are just like not an option? Like, can you play octaves? I know like beyond an octave is like just for people who are like gifted.
Yeah, I can reach a ninth pretty comfortably. Anything that I can't physically do, to be honest with you, I've stumbled upon and worked through it and figured out how to do it. And if there's another thing, I will get back to you on that. But no, things are harder to do, and I have to work harder at it or stop sooner than most people would. Like, it's actually really funny. This hand never gets tired, and this is the hand with tendinitis. So this left hand gets tired, so a lot of the times I have to like stop comping earlier or do less voicings or stop playing as hard with my left hand sooner rather than later. Cool. Avery.
So either speaking from personal experience, if you're comfortable with it, or your research, or even speculation on some of these artists that you covered, there's been a lot of equating of like disability to disadvantages. I was curious if you think there are any advantages for how your body is different or how some of these other musicians' bodies are different that allow them to do something special.
Yeah, so altogether, their disadvantages is an advantage in uniqueness, right, to their sound and how they played. Specifically for me as well, I feel weird saying this because I'm still learning, we're all still learning, but we all have a unique sound of some sort. I feel that a lot of my line choices and harmonic choices are strictly due to how I feel at the keyboard, adding that uniqueness. And not like emotionally, like how I'm physically feeling, if I should go for this thing or not. Harmonically, no, not really, because they are all studied and listened to their inspirations and wanted to play like them. Through that, develop their own sound with their physical abilities too. That kind of makes some sense. Speculatively, speculation-wise, whatever the word is, I would say yes as well, because it's just like no one else in their field had that at that moment. So they're just innately unique, rather than, you know, they all have Bud Powell influences, which was the cool thing, but they don't immediately sound like Bud Powell, right? Sort of see what I'm saying?
Of course.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There have been a number of injuries in the rhythm sections of school. But I know that's different from having a disability, but it's more of a temporary thing. How would you, in the times where you can't physically play something, how do you keep mentally sharp so that when you can play, it's as spot on as it can be?
A lot of mental practice, like singing your part. A lot of times when I'm tired from a whole day at school and I need to like really go over a part, I'll put it in like notation software and hear it back played to me if I can't totally directly sing it, and just kind of be listening to that on repeat. Another thing is always actively listening to like the recordings that you're playing from and stuff like that. A lot of just mental practice goes but you have to be honest with yourself if you're actually mentally practicing or you're just sitting down and like listening to the song. You know what I mean? Other than that, just listen to your body. Like, I don't want to say if you're injured you still can play because you cannot, but like if you think you can plunk out a line or something, or you think you can pat, if you're a drummer and you're having injuries, pat on your legs, whatever, do what is the most comfortable to activate those, you know, that thing in your brain that will translate it to the instrument as best as possible, right? If you're still working on technique, there's not really any way to work on technique mentally unless you're at the horn of the instrument. Cool. Julian.
Okay. So when I remember having heard you talk about this in the past, you've done a number of like corrective procedures on wrists. So I'm curious to hear if this is like so deep and like not answerable. I totally understand it. Like with where you're at right now, if like a hypothetical corrective procedure could exist, and like completely eliminate it, would you believe that many of these artists would kind of jump on that opportunity, or like the hardships are outweighed by the uniqueness that they have and the expressive capability that they've developed?
Yeah. I don't know, that's a hard one to answer. I know for me, medically speaking, I'm not a child anymore, so I can't heal as fast as I want to. And the surgery, like a corrective surgery for me would be like to like literally break a bone and straighten it. I don't want to do that. I'm fine the way that I am, and I've worked to be the way that I am. So I would maybe assume it's the same, but you know, I think that's like that's a super speculative thing to think about. You know, I don't know if there's a total answer to that for them, but for me it'd be like I wouldn't want to change the way that I'm, you know. And honestly, I think based off of a lot of the quotes that I read and like interviews, they're really proud of what they are. Especially like Michel Petrucciani, he didn't care at all. He just like lived life and partied and, you know, made excellent music regardless of what he was. So I don't think that they would change it. I think they're really proud of it, in a sense. That's kind of the message too to take away. It's like use that uniqueness, disability or not, you know, be really proud of that and take that into music. Yeah. Yeah.
In times, I don't know if it's as frequent now, but like in times where like you do have a player where it gets some intensity and have to like take breaks or take time away from the piano, what are some things that have helped you kind of heal quickly and just like find more peace and comfort?
Yeah. It's different for everybody. I do hand stretches where I like engage like as wide as I can, make it go as hard as I can. That really helps me stretch out. And I do forearm stretches, and also I have like 10 and 12 pound weights at the house that I just do maybe like 5 or 10 lifts of them every day just to get everything going, honestly. But, you know, stretching, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to tell you what to do to your body, but like get medical consultation because that's what I was given. But yeah, just simple things that can get the body going too without having to like lose that function, you know, because you can take a rest and not play and then that function's lost. Or you can do little things that relate to that function, like writing with a pencil. That's one thing that I have to do that keep that function going somehow, right? Anything else? Mark?
I remember when you mentioned that they were all inspired by Bud Powell, that Bud Powell, like earlier on in his career, got like a really bad head injury and he was beaten by like the police, and then it kind of like, yeah, led to a lot of like really bad stuff after that, you know, it kind of got worse. So he continued to play through all that period and like played with a bunch of incredible people and influenced like basically all of the people who came after him. So I thought that was also kind of...
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I don't know, I can't remember if I included Bud Powell on the short list that I have on the drive, but yeah, I did read that he was affected by that type of stuff and then continued playing later in his career. Cool. Anything else? Oh, claps. Yay. Let's go.